Stop.
Okay.
You need to say Wakanda forever now that you're in the middle.
One.
Hell no. You have to.
Hey! Okay, guys. Hey! Wakanda forever!
Hey guys!
Hi guys!
So welcome to Wakanda.
Yes. Welcome to Wakanda!
FriendsChatZA is relocated.
Your Highness, that is quite the entourage. Show them who we are.
Let's go!
Step into the spotlight. Step into the spotlight.
Guns. So primitive.
Now that we have your attention. Black Panther.
We're going to tell you 10 reasons why we are moving to Wakanda and giving you nuances on every one of those topics. So if you want to hear more of that, stick around.
So number one is vibranium. So in the movie we see how this is an important resource that they have. And yes, the only resource. And immediately for me, it made me think of coltan in the Congo, which is one of the only places in the world that you find coltan, which is used in batteries, which is used in electronics, in various devices where they need a piece of this resource in order to make the device work. And it's crazy to see how the genocide is being financed by those who are trying to mine this resource and take it abroad in order to, I guess, in order to sustain the industry, and an entire disregard for the people. So it's quite tragic in that sense when you think of vibranium and what kinds of...
And also how you see that when a country has a resource or an asset of value that is always open to exploitation, that a country who feels that they have maybe a little bit more muscle comes in and kind of bullies the country out of their resource, and it ends up like not really benefiting the people
itself. I mean, in the context of South Africa, if you think about, we have the fifth country to have the most production of gold and diamonds, right? And you think about how the actual benefit of that, the big case of Marikana is the poorest of the poor being the ones who are extracting this resource but not really being able to benefit at all from it, right? Number two, I think it was so incredible to see that the women were not weak, right? And so if you look at the queen leader of the army, even in the time when she could have fallen first to love as opposed to allegiance to a country, right? She's like, no, for Wakanda I will kill you. She was not depicted in a weak manner that would do anything for love beyond allegiance to the country. And I think in the same way, Nakia, right? Like she had her own dreams and her own goals as a woman, and that she wanted to work alongside with her man, but not just for her man.
And it wasn't a violent feminism of we hate men and want to kill you guys, which is often I think what they depict around the whole black women feminists who are just upset. But it was more I have my own sense of identity and I can love and appreciate you regardless, right?
And the synergistic relationship of women and men, it was I mean, in the movie there's no point that you felt that the women were being handed any favors or given the easier jobs or anything. Like the women were there fighting. The people who are backing him are women.
Women. Shuri is the one who's coming up with the technology for the country. She is at the forefront of innovation and research and development, and that was an incredible representation of women, of relationships as well.
Number three is the concept of white ally. The beautiful thing in the movie was that it was on our terms. So it was like, we are inviting you into our world and this is how we do things. And yes, you'll be surprised. You'll actually be surprised that we might even be ahead of you in thinking in certain things. And therefore we call on your advice based on what we need, not like we're like savior, thank you for coming, you know.
Do you know what I feel like? I feel like it gives almost like a depiction of what the future of white allyship should be like. Because I think for a long time a white ally comes in and they feel like they have the power and they have something to give to you, and so the relationship becomes more of a dependency relationship as opposed to you being invited into the space. But I think when black people have their solutions and they say, well, come along, we have direction and vision, it is not the white person who's coming in and saying this is what black people should be doing, right? Like, and I think so they discover our world on our tour. There is a world to be discovered in black people's lives, and I think that's it's a future depiction of what white allyship will be like. Or else the cause becomes hijacked.
That's true. And that fits in nicely with point 4, which is imagining an uncolonized Africa, which I think for me that almost left me speechless. Just the whole idea of what would we have been? What would it have looked like?
How pure would it have
exactly.
been? Yeah.
And then it's uninterrupted, you know?
Yeah. And it almost, because it gave me the sense of euphoria, but equally the sense of loss, in the sense that how many things, how many could-haves are lying in suspension somewhere that we'll never know about, how many hidden figures and hidden people who would have come to the forefront of developing an Africa that's self-sustaining. So it's
power. So the ability to imagine an uninterrupted Africa gives you the power to have your own world that you can lead.
I feel like the movie gave us permission,
yeah.
you know, to kind of dream again. I think most of us have imagined a bit about it, but it almost like it normalized the dream. It normalized the kind of like, I wonder what it would really be like, and it was beautiful. There's a scene where they're flying into Wakanda, and it's green, beautiful.
There's colors,
and it's developed because we were developed friends of God. We were developed,
and
you know.
It gave you a beautiful image because it wasn't like we'd flying into huts and like you know this primitive kind of life. It was beautiful. It was alive.
Potential.
It was strong. It was had muscle.
Number 5 being just the importance of representation. I think for me that's always been a theme, where the thing with representation is that it makes it possible. So it makes the dreaming possible. So if you think about the number of conversations that are happening around other big Black movies that are going to be produced in Hollywood, it's almost breaking that ceiling of being unable to imagine a movie that is applicable across racial lines, across wealth lines, and that's just a good quality movie. And I feel that this has broken that barrier, and that's why you see that financing is going around. A lot of the guys in Hollywood putting together a lot more movies of this nature.
The representation also represented people, yes, Black people, but also in different walks of life.
Yeah.
So this disgruntled Black man, you know, the one who didn't have his father, the one who was isolated or has abandonment issues, the Black person who's probably been in the better off situations and has enjoyed a better life, right?
Yeah.
And I think representation in that sense, it was so broad that I think that's what made it such an inclusive movie for every single
there are questions about the fact that there's no queer representation or LGBT kind of, whereas in Black Panther, in terms of the comics, you have those
really?
Yeah, you have those actual characters. So in the movie, people are like, well, why weren't some of the women like representative of something that is more dynamic as it is in society? So that was quite interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Number 6, I felt like the relationships were real as well, right? Like, so Shuri and T'Challa, like they had a brother, like sibling relationship. It was not your king, and so this is how I pray. It was like, dude, like,
I don't really care. Like,
there was like the tricks and like you know the pranks that you play with your siblings. So I really enjoyed that reality.
Yeah. I also just thought he managed so well to balance the whole, this is a very serious, informative movie, and it's also very actiony, but it's also so funny. So like, for example, the shoes, where it's like, what is this? Died. Absolutely died. But also the scene where, what's the guy's name that everyone thinks is handsome?
Mbaku.
Where Mbaku's like, I'm actually vegetarian, which is hilarious.
Mbaku, Mbaku. And he's like, are you done?
Are you done?
Are you done? Number 7 is the infusion of South African culture, which I think was one of the hallmarks of the movie, and some of the things that made it so relevant for us. You know, you saw the Sutu blankets, you heard the Xhosa language, you also saw, I guess, African spiriticism, and how like they kind of depicted that, you know, and how people believed in Africa or believe in Africa in some parts. What else? The South African music.
Yes.
It was Shem, I think they really did try reference us quite a bit. It was very funny, the accents.
Well, to hear more about why South Africans love this video so much, please go on to Azania Realness's channel. She has an incredible video on why South Africans went ham on Black Panther, which is incredible.
I mean, like, the accents could have been better, but that was funny, that was great. They tried.
I think number 8 is quite related to number 2, which is about love and feminism. I think when Okoya was responding to Nakia, wow, the names are all gone. And she was ready to leave. She was like, we can't be here and under his leadership. And she said, well, you can leave, but my allegiance is to the throne. Like, it's not just to the throne, it is to the country of Wakanda. And I thought, like, that allegiance, right? Like, to say, the country belongs to me, that kind of patriotism is what is needed to be able to actually bring things to fruition or bring things to task. Because if we always leave when the person who's leading is not who we're happy with, that means the people on the ground actually suffer, right? Like, so that I thought that was an incredible mark on the movie, on country leadership overall.
Number 9 is probably looking at the culture and leadership. So where you see Killmonger come into Wakanda and having not been raised in Wakanda, and immediately he starts to say, listen, let's burn all of that herb, which was central to the culture and the way the king was initiated and him having to drink the herb, and him coming to say that and saying, listen, I'm going to be in power forever. I think that shows an interesting dynamic about how a form of leadership in a culture is influenced by the culture, and when it's not, it can often be distorted and not be about the people.
It became only about his aspiration, right?
Yes.
And I do think that sometimes we dream of certain kinds of worlds, and we have a picture that we've set in our minds about what it's going to look like. It becomes devoid of the context, and it becomes about the self more than about the people and the actual culture.
And that's where it becomes dangerous.
African
becomes very
dictators.
dangerous.
I think for me, like, the intention of Killmonger might have been pure. Like the thing of he wants the resources to be opened up. He was disgruntled the fact that how can we be sitting on so much goodness and not be opening it up to everyone else?
Killed in America.
Black people being killed, people being arrested, and all of this here. So the intention was good, but I think that there is that dangerous line where your intentions kind of blind you to the reality that this is a culture, these are people who've been doing things a certain way, and there's a reason that it's worth it. That's why it's important.
Don't you think it also kind of represents like colonialism, like which is if when the colonialists come in, there is black culture, there is African culture in African countries, and they come in, and every single belief system of the African people suddenly becomes the wrong kind of belief, right? And so they say you have a faith in your God, but your God is the wrong God. So this is how you praise God. This is how you worship. This is what cleanliness means. And so it's like you don't build on what people actually have. You build on what your belief system is, and I think that's wrong. Like that's absolutely. It's incorrect, and I think it makes us think about how we judge the world, right? Like, and I think there's more nuance into how people live their lives beyond our view of it,
of how they should live.
And I think the best kind of leadership is the type that grafts itself into a culture, understands it, learns it, and then extracts the best things from it, so that you have kind of like a better buy-in from the people that you're leading. And I think that whole representation of Killmonger coming into Wakanda was actually quite descriptive. Like it was it illustrated so many different themes that happen in Africa.
It makes me think of this verse, you guys. It's from Proverbs 22 verse 8, and it says, "Do not move an ancient boundary set up by your ancestors." Like when you come into a place, it is not your place to remove the things that have been set up. And even it's so interesting because even like the music that was playing in the change. It was hip hop.
I guess number 10 is looking at the interesting relationship between T'Challa and Killmonger. Killmonger. So looking at that interesting relationship, and I found this scene quite intriguing where the father, so when T'Challa goes into his vision when he's given the herb to drink, and his father tells him, "You're a good man, son, and a good man cannot be king." And you see how he's compassionate towards Killmonger, and you see how for a lot of people in the conversations I had, people struggled to see Killmonger as the antagonist, but they saw redeeming qualities in him, or they almost identified with some of his arguments, which for me was a very interesting fusion of the two characters. It was one pure good and was one pure evil. So is there a danger in too much compassion and justice? Where do the two meet?
Can very good leaders lead? Like very compassionate.
Is there a goodness that must be there?
Hey, I don't know.
Or lead in a world that is shrewd in its nature and be filled with compassion. Is it possible for your compassion to
Achilles heel.
Or to triumph a world that operates in certain systems and principles, which for me is the jury's out in that.
Just to add on the first part on compassion, I absolutely loved how T'Challa had compassion for Killmonger, right? Like he said, when he asked his father, "How could you do that? How could you leave him alone?" You knew he would have nobody to raise him. And all I've experienced is having you as a father and learning how to be a man from you. So who did he learn from, right? Like, and I thought that was really important. Funny because in the context of South Africa, in South Africa, so many people have there's a child outside of the family, and the question becomes, well, who raises them? Right? Who's their parent? Who's their role model? Because if I have a father at home, he's my everything. And I think the capacity to have that kind of compassion to say, but Dad, what about them? Right? Like, so I thought that was incredibly interesting and quite relevant in our context. So I think those are some of the reasons why we thought the movie was incredibly important for such a time as this. And we'd absolutely love to hear your reasons. Why did you love the movie?
Yes.
Why have you watched it more than once or twice or 3 times?
I am going again.
I think I need to go again.
Yeah.
And also just unpack for us, like tell us what you think were the nuances in the movie that we might have missed as well. Would love to hear it.
Yes. Wakanda forever!
Wakanda forever.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye guys.